Hey guys, Lex here with yet another build update, but this one is really important because it has taken my build from being pretty okay to legitimately OP. And as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, it's all thanks to Trampletoes. Before I go any further, I need to give a shout out to another content creator. His YouTube channel is the Doppelganger, and he's a small-time content creator. Well, I'm a small-time content creator too, but he's a smaller-time content creator that deserves a bit more love in my opinion. He is the one that put a spotlight on this item for me and the strong synergies it has with some warrior abilities, especially Shield Wall. So yeah, in the effort of transparency, I like giving credit where credit is due, and he definitely deserves a ton here. Though our builds are still quite different as far as where we're getting our damage and our tankiness from. Our choice in support gems, etc. But again, you should give his videos a view. He has a great take on this item and the combo and its synergies, etc. Good guides. Definitely give his channel a look. Anyways, I'm going to try and keep the discussion of the changes on this one even shorter than last time. I mean, some of this information you're going to be aware of, some of it you may not be. But yeah, let's get into what has changed with my Magma Barrier build to where it is now one-shotting bosses with over 10 million HP. Spoiler alert, it has to do with the gem level scaling. Let's take a look. Alright, so this won't take too long, but here's a chart of the Magma Barrier's damage scaling found on the Path of Exile 2 database, and as you can see, with the way this graph curves up exponentially, you start getting absolutely crazy damage gains per gem level once you start hitting around 31 or 32 gem level. And the higher you get it, the greater the magnitude of this damage gain, to the point where honestly, you'll probably have too much damage if you're getting close to 40. So you really don't need that much, but you can see as my character currently has, let me open this up, 33 gem level, and I am hitting for listed 860k just listed damage, which is a lot. And this is easily over 1 million with the right support gems, which is wild. With the speed that you whip this thing out at, it's very easy to just obliterate whatever hits you for a ton of damage. And while you are wearing Trampletoes, you don't even really need to spec much into area of effect. The effect on these boots chains across the screen and beyond in many cases if enemies just happen to be close enough. And the damage is based off of overkill damage, 30% to be exact, but it's an instant explosion that can chain off of itself, so it is very, very strong, especially since we're hitting for crazy numbers very quickly with Magma Barrier. So that 30% overkill damage is huge and is going to wipe out all mobs in a single Magma Barrier. Seriously, I haven't seen a single mob on the highest tier maps survive this combo. But now the question is, how do we utilize this combo for bosses? Alright, real quick, we've been talking about it a lot, but let's get Magma Barrier out of the way. So basically, since the hit damage scales so high with skill gem level, it made sense to cast aside trying to amplify ignite damage and just try to, again, amplify the hit damage as high as possible. Don't get me wrong, I think that there is probably a version of this build that can utilize ignite with this crazy damage, and I think I might try experimenting with that again later, but for now, we're just using support gems that boost up the hit damage to those crazy numbers. And real quick, these are what the support gems look like. I am using Fire Infusion so that we gain 25% of our damage as extra fire damage. Elemental Focus, very important. This is a huge damage boost to your hit damage with elemental attacks. And Fire Mastery, obviously, as we've talked about, getting plus level to this ability in particular is going to give you huge damage gains. So this one level is just so much. If we take it out, actually, let's try this real quick. If we take this out, we have 860k listed. Take this out, and we are now at 660k. So that is 200k average damage per use in one support gem. Kind of wild. And then after that, I have Magnified Effect. This is for mapping. I mean, this is more area of effect, and this doesn't actually affect the area of effect of the Trampletoes effect. This is only for the magma spray itself, so this is just to help it hit more mobs in case I need to try and chain it across, like, groups that won't be connected by the Trampletoes effect. So that's why this is here. But when I'm bossing, I obviously I switch this out with something that gives me more damage. I think I usually switch it out with Immolate, so that's just 30% more damage for free on ignited enemies. I'm usually cursing them with Flammability, which ignites them with the way I have it gemmed right now. So that's kind of the way this is right now. And I think I will slot in another damage gem perhaps once I have the 5th slot opened here. But that's what Magma Barrier looks like for now. I'm going to skip Mace Strike and Encase and Jade for now. The purposes of those abilities are the same as the last video, and you can see the explanation is there if you want. And Flammability, obviously I just mentioned this, it's still here. I slotted a new support gem in it though. We got Heightened Curse, which gives it a greater effect of bringing down your target's fire resistance, so really useful in boss fights. But yeah, overall this skill is super useful for amplifying our Magma Barrier damage and just getting rid of any big damage negation a boss or mob might have, so really useful curse. I really like this one, and it's the whole reason my intelligence is so high, honestly. But remember, this is only the level 11 version of the curse, just because the higher level ones require so much more intelligence and don't really give you that much more like fire resistance reduction. So I think level 11 is fine. It's been working just great for me. Oh, and real quick, it's inflicting fire exposure because it ignites with this gem. Really good synergies here. The whole ground ignites when you cast this, and really useful against fire resistance mobs or bosses. Really like this ability. Good setup skill. Just amplifies the damage, everything you really need. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, Perfect Strike is here, but I'm not really going to go over it. It's honestly just kind of a backup skill at this point. Like if there's a mob I know I can't block the attack of, or like if they're using some kind of big wind-up attack and I just don't want to wait for the Magma Barrier, I'll just kind of smack them with this, or Mace Strike, which does some decent DPS too. But yeah, overall Perfect Strike is here to just because it can hit for a bit, but it's literally like nothing. The damage is nothing compared to Magma Barrier's damage. I think might be less than 1%, honestly. And these are, real quick, these are the support gems, just, you know, kind of random amplifying damage support gems, although I might move Rage Forge up to Magma Barrier if I have this fifth slot, and it makes sense to, because Magma Barrier can actually consume Rage if you have this gem in there, and it hits for 35% more. So we'll see. I might use a different one. 35% is pretty good, but I might be able to use a stronger gem. We'll see. I gotta play around with that a little more. Here's an interesting addition. Resonating Shield. A lot of you probably know that this actually activates Magma Barrier when you start channeling this. The timing is pretty much the same as active block. Like as soon as you hit the input, the Magma Barrier active window starts. Though the animation of this ability can kind of throw you off a little. Well, at least it did for me. It threw me off a little bit, so it took a little adjustment for me to time it correctly, but it doesn't take too long to get used to. However, one word of warning is that sometimes the shockwave sent out by this channel can mini stun or stagger mobs like right before they're about to hit you, which can make them miss your Magma Barrier window, so just be aware of that. But yeah, there's some extra benefits you get here. Obviously, you get the benefit of everything you've slotted Magma Barrier with, but then you can slot in whatever you want to Resonating Shield for some bonus effects. I mean, the one thing I like actually is mobility on this thing, because your movement speed is noticeably faster when using Magma Barrier when using this over active block. Definitely saves you a bit of time as you are mapping. For fun, I just did like a comparison video in my hideout just to see how much longer it took to move from one point to another, even though you won't be holding block the whole time, obviously. You'll still notice a big difference even while just trekking across maps with the short active block taps. And yeah, as far as the other support gems, I'm using Rage here to build up Rage as I am channeling this, Demolisher to break more armor with this one, and Life Tap because I found that it would drain a bit of mana with how often I was using this, so I wanted to just remove any worry of mana drain from this. Obviously, I'm just being lazy here. You can totally not have Life Tap and put something else in here that might be more useful or something that you prefer. I just didn't want to hit my mana potion over and over again, which is, yeah, that's just on me. But yeah, let's keep it moving. We have Shield Wall next, and I'm absolutely loving this. This is the skill that lets us one-shot bosses. However, I should say, as a warning, and the Doppelganger agrees, that this is something that's going to get nerfed. It's just to be straight with you. I don't know when they will, but for now, it's still in the game, so this is, you know, this is early access. We're gonna meme. So you try to place 1, 2, maybe 3 of these as close as you can to where the boss is spawning or doing its little entrance animation. Then you can cast Flammability, although sometimes I forget to. Still getting used to this new combo. But after the boss is cursed, you Magma Barrier an attack that'll hit both the boss and the shield walls. And then you'll set off an explosion that hits for just so much damage. I think the best way to picture this is that these shield wall clusters are basically bombs, and your short-range Magma Barrier is the fuse, though you also want to hit the boss with this fuse. So the positioning can be tricky sometimes, and obviously you have to wait for the boss to throw out a blockable attack, but it is so worth it when you get it right. I think this is because Trampletoes considers each individual shield wall segment as a mob, and each shield wall segment gets dealt that overkill damage, so the boss is getting hit for each segment's overkill damage, which adds up to, well, death. Again, they're going to nerf this in some way. I think they've already done so with other similar interactions with other abilities, so we'll just have to see. I would love if they were able to nerf this interaction without like completely gutting it. I think it'd be cool to be rewarded, you know, for setting up a shield wall and positioning correctly to deal some big damage, just not the whole boss's health bar, obviously. Anyways, this is how I have it gemmed up. We got Fortress, which makes the shield wall appear in clusters instead of just a big wall. This is what's really useful, you know, make those concentrated clusters of of damage that you want to hit the magma barriers with that will deal all that damage to the boss. So really useful. I like Fortress for that, obviously. And then there's Martial Tempo. This makes it appear a little faster. It's a little slow without it. I normally have this slotted into Perfect Strike, but this is way more important than Perfect Strike right now. And so you can get these down a little faster in mid-fight too even. It's a little slow and feels kind of bad if you're trying to do this mid-fight without this. So definitely like Martial's Tempo for this one. Font of Rage is really nice because as you're sitting there waiting for the boss to finish their animation or their entrance or whatever, you can build up Rage, which is going to give you some extra damage, and again makes me want to slot in Rage Forged into Magma Barrier because that's just a free extra 35% damage. So some interesting synergy there. You can probably switch this out with other fonts if you prefer, but I think Font of Rage is probably the one you want. And then Persistence, because in a boss fight, the boss might open with an attack that you can't block. So it's good to have these walls last a little bit longer. So as you wait for that one like magma variable ability. So this is why Persistence is here. The walls will last longer and you have more up at the same time, which is also just more damage. So I think it's really useful here. Infernal Cry is here. I don't really use this that much anymore, honestly. I think I use it to empower my shield charges every now and then to kill kind of one-off mobs that are not caught in magma barriers, that are a little too strong for like just mace striking down or something. So it's here, but I don't really use it very often. I use it to empower certain attacks, maybe a Perfect Strike, maybe a shield charge, maybe also to get it as some rage. Again, maybe I'll switch that Rage Forge gem up to Magma Barrier. I think I still have, yeah, here it is, Raging Cry. So this is a decent rage generator, but again, I don't use it that often anymore, to be honest. So I might slot something else in, but for now, it's going to stay until I, mull it over a bit more. Yep, and speaking of Shield Charge, it is here. Shield Charge is actually hitting pretty hard. I think I actually use this more than Perfect Strike now that I think about it, to kill, as I was saying, loner mobs, or if your stagger meter is getting full, you want to use another attack to quickly, like, kill a group. This actually hits hard enough to hurt. It's nowhere near as strong as Magma Barrier, obviously, but it's hitting for around 50k, I think, listed as with the way I have it gemmed right now. So it's not bad, but yeah, the support gems I have in this are just kind of to help me cast it a little more often with Ingenuity. I think it costs a lot of mana currently without Inspiration, so Inspiration is here to reduce the mana cost. Concentrate effect just to boost its damage up a bit more, to be a little more relevant, to actually be able to kill things, And I have Exploit Weakness here, which will consume broken armor, fully broken armor, to deal 50% more damage. You might actually want to slot this into Magma Barrier if your ranks are a little bit lower, or if you just feel like you need more damage with it. This I could see being useful up there. That's a huge damage boost. So that's also something I'm kind of mulling around in my head as well. But for now, it's here to stay, because you need to have fully broken armor on your target before you get that big boost to Magma Barrier damage. So I'm not sure what order the things are applied when you use Shield Wall. I don't know if the armor is broken first and then you get to consume it, etc. I don't think it is. I think you'd have to break armor with something else first. So anyways, yeah, I'm going on and on and on. And Scavenge Plating is now here. I'm experimenting with staying at armor cap while mapping and doing simulacrums. We'll get into the armor break stuff later since I spec'd my Ascendancy back into that again. But as we're running through maps and we're breaking armor, this buff is pretty much constantly up, and it's constantly getting us right to armor cap with this current setup. So it feels nice, since armor, I think, is most relevant to crowds of mobs. I feel like it's kind of less relevant against bosses. It's okay if you're not armor capped against bosses, in my opinion, because a lot of their attacks are just going to decimate you in one hit anyway, the most dangerous ones. So it's okay, not necessary against boss fights, in my opinion. It's okay to not be armor capped in boss fights. I could be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise, but that's kind of my take on it. Yep, and last is Time of Need. It's still here, no surprise, though you'll see I don't have it in a lot of the gameplay clips at the end of this video because I just bought an amulet for 2 divines that gives me enough spirit to run this third aura. So yeah, I recently just slotted this back in. I highly recommend it because I feel like it's more of a lifesaver than Scavenged Plating at times. The heal and the debuff removal is huge, especially with the support gem right here, making it go off more often. Yeah, super useful. But yeah, that's currently what the skills are looking like. Again, I'll mention here that I have a build guide that I'll link in the description of this video if you want to refer to the skills, support gems, gear, passive skill tree, etc. at any time. You can go ahead and take a look, but for now, let's go over the new passive skills. Alright, so if you've been following this build for a while, you probably noticed that this looks similar to the previous version, but there are also quite a few differences, and I'm going to try to go over them as quickly as I can. Alright, first let's go over the Ascendancy. We spec'd back into Anvil's Weight because, well, there are some good support gems that synergize with Armor Break, like Armor Explosion, Exploit, etc. I still have to find a spot for Armor Explosion, but we also take these points because I don't really need the Shout clear anymore. We're just destroying the screen with just Magma Barrier and Trampletoes, so it just gets rid of everything so quickly and rapidly that I didn't really find a need for the Warcaller's Bellow anymore. But yeah, as far as big differences in the skill tree here, we spec'd out of most of our area of effect with attacks nodes, like the ones here and the ones down here. But we want to maintain anything that buffs up our area of effect, which is important because it amplifies Trampletoes effect. Trampletoes effect is not considered an attack, so that's why those previous nodes aren't as important anymore. Feels kind of freeing, honestly, to have those points to throw around wherever, but again, with this build, we're trying to hit some decent area of effect nodes. Some examples of this are Primal Growth. You can see we have 20% increased area of effect here if we've killed recently, and then there's 10% increased area of effect for attacks. Again, that second part does not apply to Trampletoes effect. And then we have some nodes up here, which is a nice combination of fire damage and increased area of effect, these three here. So yeah, really useful stuff. We're no longer using Sphalan since Magma Barrier and Shield Charge scale greatly with the armor rating of your shield, so that means we have to make up for Sphalan's awesome lucky block effect by speccing into more block chance. So we've grabbed some more block chance on the tree here, as you can see these nodes here, and we finally made our way over here to grab these block chance nodes and to grab Lay Siege, which gives us 1% increased damage per 1% chance to block. So this is basically 70-75% damage increase in one node, which is really useful, and we also have this up here, so we're kind of doubling up. This does a similar thing. Oh, let me make sure I'm not blocking it. So this also does a similar thing, another 75% damage per block chance on your shield. Really useful. Speaking of which, I'm usually around 70% chance to block, but with this node down here, we're actually block capped. I know it's nice to be block capped passively, I understand, but since we're using Magma Barrier all the time, this node will be active pretty much all the time, and we're essentially always block capped anyway, as long as you're chaining together Magma Barrier blocks quickly enough. So we're mostly good here. But aside from that, I had to change the way I was traveling around here. I needed some extra strength, so I want to get this 15 strength node, and obviously these strength nodes here. Beef is really useful for trying to get strength requirements fulfilled. But we're actually no longer stacking into these one-handed damage nodes here. I do miss this one. I do miss Reaving because of the 15 dex that was attached to it. But ultimately, Magma Barrier, Shield Charge, and Resonating Shield, and surprisingly even Perfect Strike don't really get boosted by these. Perfect Strike is pretty much all fire damage when it's perfectly timed, so it actually doesn't get that much benefit from these nodes. And yet we still have Avatar of Fire here since we're grabbing a bunch of fire damage boosting nodes. I mean, it makes sense to convert all of the damage that we're doing to fire damage. We're actually no longer grabbing these nodes though, because honestly, they're just kind of inefficient. Like we're already inflicting fire exposure with the curse, with the way I have it gemmed. Oh, let me make sure that I'm not blocking it again. So we already have this, we already have fire exposure from the curse. And then we have this fire damage, node we might miss. But this is just stun buildup and penetrating fire resistance, penetration, magnitude of ignite. We're not really igniting. And this is, again, kind of an ignite node. So really, I'm not that interested in these. Really, I only want the fire damage. And penetration, I would say, is not actually, the fire penetration is not that important because it's really only useful for mapping. Like, if we're going to curse a boss, their resistances are going to be lowered so far down anyway. They'll probably go into the negatives. And fire penetration will only bring a resistance down to 0. Once something is down to 0, and if you're trying to bring it down further, penetration has no effect. So fire penetration, honestly, not as strong as I initially thought, so I've kind of veered away from it. And real quick, I'll go over the gems I have slotted. I mean, most of them are just going to be fire damage and block chance. Some of the other stats are, like increased chance to ignite here is not really relevant. It was just cheap. So I got this for block chance and fire damage. Those are the most important things for me right now. I just wanted to make sure I was getting as close to block cap as possible. So that's what these gems are. However, obviously, there's going to be a special shout out to Prism of Belief. This gets you Magma Barrier skills, or any skill really. You just look it up. You have to find it on trade. You can find these Prism of Belief diamonds that will boost up the level of a specific skill. Just look for the right skill. Magma Barrier, I'm going to say, is very expensive right now. I think I got this one for 6 divines, and if you want a +3, it's I think you're looking at 9 to 10 divines currently. So this is really useful. Obviously, you want ranks to Magma Barrier. That's where all your damage is coming from at this point, but this is on the pricier side, so just keep that in mind. And as far as future considerations, I think I may try to spec down here at some point and grab these maximum elemental resistance nodes, as well as the this unnatural resilience node, and some of these nodes as well. I'm starting to realize the value in maximum elemental resistances, because you feel a lot tankier against some of those dangerous attacks in the game when you have some of these maximum elemental resistance nodes. And the way I was going to do that, I think I may infuse my amulet to get Lay Siege here, and then just respec some of these elsewhere, probably down here to grab this, and then to make up for the block chance, maybe these two here, just, you know, kind of spitballing here. But there are definitely some tweaks that I noticed that I could, you know, implement here and there. So just, again, keep an eye on the build. You'll see some updates as they come through. But yeah, that's kind of where my head's at right now. But yeah, that's the build now. I know I said I was sticking to it before, and I've stuck to the skeleton of the previous build, I'd say. But yeah, there are definitely a bunch of changes, and it's all for the better since we're now just trampling through the end game. But yeah, anyways, let's go over the gear real quick. Alright, I'm back in the middle. So the most important change for the gear here is plus levels of melee skills. This should be no surprise after explaining how Magma Barrier's damage scaling works. The higher you can crank that skill's gem level up, the crazier the numbers will get. It'll also scale with plus levels of fire spells on gear, so that's another thing to keep in mind for like any other varieties of this build y'all come up. Truth be told, that means my gear is getting a little bit more on the expensive side, getting max rolls on plus melee on your gear, as well as getting decent rolls alongside that, like resistances and max health, etc. It's going to crank up the price a little bit. But that said, I think if you're going to start building this, you should start with gloves and a melee weapon. You know, gloves can roll +2 to all melee skills and +5 to all melee skills on one-handers. You can get up to +7 on two-handers if you want to go the Giant's Blood route, but it's kind of hard to meet the strength requirements for that type of build. The Doppelganger actually runs Giant's Blood with a lower level mace, since you technically don't really need weapon damage at all. You just need the right rolls on your weapon. So I don't know. I like having a backup option, though. I don't like relying solely on Magma Barrier. I like having a one-handed thing that could also deal some damage, you know, with Mace Strike or Perfect Strike, etc. Also, again, I feel like it's possible to get too much damage on a build like this, so you'll want to start prioritizing things like, you know, tankiness and utility instead at a certain point. So for me personally, I haven't felt the need to go Giant's Blood, but then again, you know, that's up to you to experiment with. Oh, and make sure that your weapon has a good increased elemental damage with attacks roll. Here, I'll mouse over mine real quick, since that also applies to Magma Barrier damage. So yeah, those are like the two most important things on your weapon: maxed out plus melee skills and a high increased elemental damage with attacks roll. And as you can see, I got lucky with the corruption on this weapon, so I have the double sockets here, and I put this soul core in there. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it's the one that gives you 30% increased elemental damage with attacks. So I'm getting an extra 60% increased elemental damage with attacks with these two soul cores. Yeah, super strong for this build. And as I mentioned earlier, I switched out Sphalen with some shields that have rolled highly in armor value alongside some other useful stats. But yeah, the armor value helps Magma Barrier and Shield Charge hit that much harder, since both of those skills scale with your shield's armor value, and Sphalen is amazing with its lucky block effect, but unfortunately has very low armor value, so you're going to be nerfing yourself significantly damage-wise if you stick with it. And as you can see, I didn't get lucky with either of these shields for the double socket corruption, so you know, there are potential upgrades here, but I'm hitting like a truck regardless, so I'm happy enough. Amulets can roll up to +3 in melee, and I think there's a unique actually that can roll up to +4 in fire skills, so there's an extra way you can get an extra level out of that if you want to try and like play around with this build a little bit. But I'm really happy with this amulet for now. As I said earlier, I bought this for a couple divines. I needed the extra spirit so I could run 3 auras. Has fire resistance, has maximum life, some armor, honestly a lot of what I was looking for, so I'm really happy with it. Other than that, I think I already explained Trampletoes' effect pretty well. I mean, these are pretty cheap on the market, at least last I checked. They were like some decently rolled ones would be 20 exalted, so not too bad, sometimes less than that. But overall, this is how my gear is looking here. I'll mouse over the other pieces real quick so you can see just important rolls. Oh, on the rings especially, you want to get increased fire damage. You can see 30% here, 29% here. Pretty important. That's obviously a significant damage boost to Magma Barrier. But yeah, other than that, I'm just trying to hit resistance caps, getting some extra life where I can, extra stats where I can. A lot of intelligence rolls, obviously, because I need intelligence to run the curse. But yeah, I mean, that's currently what the gear setup is looking like for now. Anyways, that's the new build. It's definitely legitimately overpowered right now. I'm sure we're going to have to figure something else out once they nerf the Trampletoes and Shield Wall interaction. But for now, if you're looking for a way as a warrior to deal one-shotable damage to bosses, this is seemingly a great option. Like last time, I'm going to leave you with a bunch of gameplay highlights running this build. Definitely feels insanely strong for all endgame content, you know, pinnacle bosses, simulacrums, etc. So enjoy the clips, and I'll see you guys next time.
Just try it!